Welcome, age of vintage society. What do you know about David Niven? Some would describe him as one who could not hurt a fly, that is sure in movies, but he had a dark side off screen. For real, he got fame, money and prestige. Yes, he also got a fair share of childhood bullying and even sexual assaults. Did that also ignite his regular sexual urge to be with more women later in life? The only thing this British-born Oscar winner arguably failed to achieve in life is to be faithful to one woman. Why David Niven failed to be faithful to one woman only. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. David Niven is the English finest gentleman of an actor you know. He was also a prolific writer. His career creativity did not limit him to the entertainment industry, which he became interested in from childhood, as he equally rose to the rank of British Army Lieutenant Colonel after serving in World War II. Like most Hollywood actors, Niven had a life outside his movie character that may surprise most of his fans, but that does not make him bad. As a writer puts it, he did at least try to be a decent man. He was described as one who was more sophisticated than his bright and windy on-screen character. He once told interviewers how he was ruthlessly bullied, crushed and sexually battered as a child in a school before he was relocated. "I felt that I would never forgive my mother and stepfather for sending me there," he had said. Perhaps Niven wasn't always the ideal gentleman you used to know, as facts suggest that he appeared insecure and would often stalk people to get ahead, including his mighty philandering that is now seen as legendary. Even as he identified with the contentious Errol Flynn, he would later settle with an extremely dazzling Swedish supermodel. It is not just about him or his pencil-thin moustache, the smooth-talking alpha male posture, or his accent. Then what really is the charm behind this Hollywood Prince Charming that kept him getting it hot and cold? Well, some people said he just knew how to accept regardless of what was thrown at him, because he always kept his cool. Niven had an excellent Hollywood and military career and was active from 1932 up to 1983. He won the Academy Awards in 1958 as Best Actor for his recital as Major Pollock in Separate Tables. Niven also won the heart of many as he continued his entertainment career exploit after he left British military service, where he was also honoured with the Legion of Merit ribbon. Despite his fame and wildly cherished persona, when the ugly hands of death came knocking, according to his son David Niven Jr., he could not do otherwise. It was very hard for him. He travelled the world searching for a cure, but there is none for this cruel disease, he said, and had added that the illness took away what was so special about his father, his perfect vocal power, of course. As a young family man, Niven was said to have attempted killing himself with a gun when his wife accidentally killed herself during a party, but the gun he pointed at himself refused to fire. He later described the failed suicide as a way fate reminded him that he still had his 2 kids to take care of. Born James David Graham Niven on the 1st of March 1910 at Belgrave Mansions, Grosvenor Gardens in London, to William Edward Graham Niven and Henrietta Julia, the couple that named him David because he was born on St. David's Day, although Niven stated that he was born somewhere in Kirriemuir in the Scottish district of Angus in 1909, contrary to what was on his birth certificate. Niven is of Scottish ancestry, however, and his father died during the First World War. After his father's death, his mother remarried in London in 1917 to a conformist politician, Sir Thomas Conwyn Platt. Niven and his mother had settled in Rose Cottage in Bembridge, having sold their family home in London. Literary editor Graham Lord, who wrote about David Niven, hinted that Conwyn Platt and Niven's mother may have had their love relationship going long before her husband's death in 1915, and suggested that Conwyn Platt was actually Niven's biological father, an assertion that looks credible among Niven's siblings, as visual evidence did strongly suggest a natural similarity between Niven and Conwyn Platt, which critics say would appear to confirm these theories, although photographs are sometimes misleading. Niven was said to have also hinted that he knew that Comyn Platt was his true father a year before his own demise. At the time, his mother and her new husband had Niven sent to a certain boarding school, where Niven later talked about how he was bullied, isolated and abused. As a 6-year-old kid, then, he had little choice of his own, even as senior pupils would regularly batter the young boys, with school authorities not doing much about it, not when some of the teachers are an accomplice in the act too. To this Niven had stated about a hostile teacher, when he is tired of pulling ears halfway out of our heads for the smallest mistake, he would try backhanded slaps that knocked one off one's bench, and showed me the hand that wrote this, was his famous slug for bringing down the sharp edge of a heavy ruler across the offending wrist. It was said that Niven was so pained by all that he went through that he had to return to the school in search of the said teacher years after joining the British Army, only to find the place uninhabited and empty. At the time, Niven had left the school for Heatherdown Preparatory School, but it ended suddenly at the age of 10 when he was expelled as eventual punishment for the many costly jokes that became part of him. It also halted his chances for Eton College, which his parents frowned at. He also failed to pass a naval entrance exam, hence had found himself later at Stowe School, a new school administered by J.F. Roxburgh, who became more accommodating with him compared to other headmasters. Sometime in 1928, then 18, Niven was having intercourse with 15-year-old Margaret Wigham. At the time she was on holiday in Bembridge and got pregnant. It angered Wigham's father so much that he took his daughter to a London nursing home for an undisclosed termination, according to Elizabeth Duckworth, who was the family cook. Regardless of the incident, Wigham cherished Niven all through his life and was part of the VIP guests at Niven's memorial service in London. In 1928, Niven joined the Royal Military College, Sandhurst. He did so well, finished in 1930, and joined British Army with a commission as a second lieutenant in the Highland Light Infantry. His activities in Sandhurst earned him the Officer and Gentleman trademark that served him well during his film career. After serving the HLI for 2 years in Malta, plus a few months in Dover, he became acquainted with Roy Urquhart to be commander of the British 1st Airborne Division. Being a vibrant fellow, Niven may have been fed up with the peacetime army, even after being elevated as a lieutenant on 1st of January 1933. He probably wanted more actions and status. At the time he was already nursing an interest in developing his acting talent. Soon he found a standby role in the British film There Goes the Bride in 1932. The urge for something new career-wise continued until he decided to drop his guns and leave the army. His decision to resign came following a boring machine guns training, which was said to have interfered with his date with a certain pretty young lady. When the Major General who gave the lecture declared the questions and answers section, Niven was said to have rebelliously asked, "Could you tell me the time, sir? I have to catch a train." He was placed under house arrest thereafter, where Niven and Roddy Rose, who was guarding him, were said to have finished a bottle of whisky before Niven was allowed to escape through a window, from which he relocated to the US. While in transit through the Atlantic, he tendered his resignation from the army through a telegram in 1933. In New York City, Niven did a few odd jobs before travelling to Hollywood, where he hired an agent and began a slow film career as first seen in Barbary Coast, Mutiny on the Bounty, and A Feather in Her Hat, all in 1935. His performance particularly attracted the attention of independent film producer Samuel Goldwyn, who later gave him a contract that would establish his career. He began with a minor part in Splendour in 1935 and was rented to MGM for a bit role in Rosemarie in 1936 as David Nivens. He also did a similar role in Palm Spring the same year for Paramount. Niven made a significant impact for Goldwyn in Dodsworth 1936, appearing as a man flirting with Ruth Chatterton, before being loaned to 20th Century Fox for Thank You Jeeves. Then he appeared as a soldier in The Charge of the Light Brigade for Warner's, still in 1936. The film was a royal adventure that starred Errol Flynn. Niven soon became an A film star when he appeared in The Dawn Patrol in 1938, playing a leading role. Niven was said to have been privately trained in acting by famous British actor Merle Oberon, with whom he had a serious romantic affair, then in London, and appeared in Beloved Enemy together with her in 1936. The two cohabited for a while in Hollywood, but Niven sees as an impossibility the act of being faithful to one woman. When the two parted, Niven intensified his womanizing, honing his skill and earning a status as a ladies' man by pulling with fellow hellraiser and philanderer Errol Flynn to an apartment suitably called Cirrhosis by the Sea. But when he noticed that Flynn's sexuality was questionable, he quickly left the love nest of an apartment. The burst of World War II brought him back to London, where he got entangled with Air Force cipher Clark Primula Susan Rollo, also known as Primmy, in what Niven once described as love at first sight. After a brief romance, the duo got married quietly in a church on the Wiltshire Downs on the 16th of September 1940, even as the Battle of Britain thundered high. The union produced two boys, David Jr. and James Graham Niven. On the 6th of November 1945, disaster struck at a party hosted by movie star Tyrone Power in Beverly Hills, and this was just 6 weeks after Niven moved his family back to the US. In what appeared to be a game of hide-and-seek, Primmy is said to have mistakenly opened a cellar door and found herself in a 20-foot fall that fractured her skull and eventually led to her death at the age of 28. Demented with grief, Niven was said to have put a gun to his head, and luckily the trigger jammed. It obviously was a huge loss for Niven, as he later recalled, "I was never happier in my life than when I was with her. Never." Then in 1948, Niven met and wedded Hjordis Paulina Tersmaden, a divorced Swedish fashion model, in what was described as a disastrous second marriage. Not just because she was a heavy drinker, but she was tormented with mental illness that made a misery of Niven's life. It was a total deviation from how he felt at the time he met her, although he made a conscious decision to endure everything that he went through. "I had never seen anything so beautiful in my life. Tall, slim, auburn hair, up-tilted nose, lovely mouth, and grey eyes I had ever seen," he had said, describing her beauty. It seems Niven did not think it wise to blame Hjordis for their shameful marriage, possibly because he knew that the complications were as much his error as hers, hence had stuck with her till the end, but it did not stop him from his philandering. There was a gossip media report suggesting that Niven lived with guilt and was haunted his entire life by the smear of illegitimacy that he tried to persuade Hjordis to foster his love child. Even more scandalous was a report that Hjordis, who passed away after she suffered a stroke in 1997 at the age of 78, was infected with an STD after having a quickie with pre-epic US President Jack Kennedy. But Niven's affairs were broader, as the like of former Hollywood actress Grace Kelly, and theatrically Princess Margaret was also fingered. Based on information from a good friend of Niven, he was frolicking romantically with Margaret, who was 20 years younger. When Niven started experiencing fatigue and muscle weakness, plus a sing-out in his voice, as observed in his 1981 interviews on the talk shows of Michael Parkinson and Merv Griffin, friends and his family were worried. His fans who watched the show concluded that either Niven was drunk or had a stroke, although he attributed it to the shooting schedule of a movie he had been working on. Niven turned a hit on the chat show tour, telling tall, overly modest tales that he had spectators in sutures. His tales eventually formed the content of his much-commended memoirs, The Moon's a Balloon and Bring on the Empty Horses. Analysts think that these stories are just bigger than his films as a powerful legacy. But shortly David Jr. spoke about his father's acclaimed story. He was rather surprised that he chose to make a secret revelation to someone he described as a stranger, Michael Munn, who was credited with Niven's famous biography. He also wondered how his father was able to communicate all that was said owing to his impaired speech condition at the time. Mum was said to have first met Niven sometime in 1970. Then Mum was just 18 and a trainee junior film publicist. He was reported to have interviewed Niven 7 times from that period up to his final moment in 1983. He also claims that he was invited by Niven to his Mayfair flat in London just prior to his death, speaking these incoherent words, "I need to see you, Mike, bring a tape recorder." But sooner he got diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, often referred to as Lou Gehrig's disease. Somehow friends knew that it was over for this great talent. Sometime in 1983, under a pseudo-name to avoid unwanted publicity, Niven got hospitalised for days, supposedly for a digestive disorder. Though his condition worsened, he preferred to leave the hospital as a way of accepting his fate. David Niven later died at his log cabin from ALS on the 29th of July 1983, when he turned 73. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. David Niven was irresistible to women and had many adventures with Errol Flynn. How Errol Flynn almost ended up in jail. Watch this video and find out.